Gnaeus Pompeius was the only son of social war commander and ex-consul, Pompeius Strabo. Having reached the age of majority at the same time as Rome fought her Italian allies, young Pompeius served as a junior military tribune, under the command of his father, during the latter half of the social war. When his father died, young Pompeius was approximately 19 or 20 years old. From various sources, we are told conflicting stories about Rome's reaction to the death of Pompeius Strabo. In one version, the Roman people, outraged that Strabo's negligence had caused an outbreak of plague which had claimed the lives of many Romans, decided to avenge themselves upon the ex-consul's body. Chaining his corpse to the back of a chariot, we are told Strabo's lifeless body was dragged through the streets of Rome for the people to insult and abuse. Then, like trash, his body was thrown in the Tiber River. In another version, we are told these events nearly played out, prevented only by the desperate pleas and tears of Strabo's dutiful son. Whichever version of this story bears out the truth, it seems highly unlikely that either scenario would leave the young man unscathed in his attitude towards Rome and her vindictive people. As his father's sole heir, Pompeius inherited all of Strabo's properties, estates, business dealings, clientele, and, more important than anything, the loyalty of the legions his father had settled in Picenum. Because Strabo had auctioned off the property of those who resisted during the social war, and kept the profits for himself, he was posthumously charged with plundering public property. Since Roman law allowed the adult children of accused to be held legally accountable in civic cases, young Pompeius was indicted for his father's alleged crime. Such an indictment, it seems, would have done little to endear the young man towards a people for which he probably held some measure of growing contempt. The judge for Pompeius's trial, a man by the name of Antistius, took a liking to the charismatic young man. Perhaps he felt compassion for Pompeius's situation as a young man forced to defend his father's corpse, then to be brought to trial soon after. Or, the judge may have felt that aligning himself with a young man who had just inherited the die-hard allegiance of so many veterans might prove useful to him in the future. For reasons known only to the judge, Pompeius was offered a marriage. He accepted the judge's daughter, Antistia, as a wife, and then he was promptly acquitted of his father's alleged crime. Like Gaius Marius and so many others, Pompeius Strabo had reached the consulship while being defined as a new man. Though he seemed the perfect ally for the populares, Pompeius Strabo chose to side with the Optimates during Cinna's and Sertorius's siege of Rome. The fact his father chose Rome's elite over her common people might be why Pompeius, of his own initiative, and with no authority or senatorial directive, raised 3 full legions from among his late father's loyal troops, veterans, retirees, and clientele. His army complete, Pompeius began a march to deliver his men to the hands of Sulla. Another Marian commander, a general named Brutus Damasippus, was one of 3 commanders sent against Pompeius the moment the Marians learned of the young man's unlawful conscription of legions for Sulla. Damasippus marched his army to join Marian commanders, Carinus and Censorinus. These 3 combined commanders attacked Pompeius at Clusium, where at only the age of 24 years old, Pompeius defeated their forces. When Pompeius arrived with 3 legions of freshly blooded troops, a surprised Sulla, who understood that his legions had rallied out of loyalty to young Pompeius rather than himself, named Pompeius as one of his primary lieutenants. This allowed the young man to lead his own men, while simultaneously earning, for Sulla, the approval and respect of those men. Sulla then ordered Pompeius to march to the aid of Metellus Pius in Etruria, who was in Carbo's crosshairs. When Carbo reached Etruria, he found a much larger army than he had anticipated. This tied him up longer than he planned, and left the inexperienced Marius the Younger alone to face Sulla. At the town of Sacriportus, Marius the Younger lost almost 30,000 men to Sulla, who lost 23. With Marius routed, most of his remaining forces scattered. Marius, and the 7,000 who remained loyal to him, made for the heavily fortified town of Praeneste, or modern-day Palestrina. Before bolting himself behind the town's protected walls, he wrote to his loyal adherents in Rome that the battle was lost. Fearing Sulla would march on Rome again, Marius the Younger sent orders to immediately execute anyone they thought might attempt to aid Sulla in retaking the city. The names of every senator who had voiced conservative support in the Senate during the Cinna administration were added to Marius the Younger's letter, then he sent it off to Rome. Another purge of conservatives, launched by the Marian Party, engulfed Rome. Politicians of every level, from lower magistracies, all the way up to the Pontifex Maximus, were executed without trial. Some were murdered within their homes. Others were attacked in the streets. Some were drowned at the baths, and many more took their own lives. The Tiber River, filled with corpses, ran red. The three commanders who had lost to Pompeius, took what forces remained to them, and fled to the Samnite Italians. Because the Samnites still fought on behalf of the Marians, the three commanders joined with them, then turned their combined armies towards Rome. Sulla, who desperately needed to stop the ensuing bloodbath in Rome, immediately sent one of his prefects, Ofella, to conduct a siege on Praeneste. Within a matter of days, Ofella's quickly built siegeworks and barricades completely cut off the town. Sulla also ordered his cavalry to ride ahead in the hopes of slowing down the Samnite armies, while he prepared his legions for a hard, forced march to Rome. The Samnite armies arrived outside Rome's Colline gate early in the morning of November 1, 82 BC, terrifying the city's inhabitants. The city attempted to send out their own cavalry force, however, against the warlike Samnites, they were easily dispatched. This attempt, however, did give Sulla's dispatched cavalry, who had raced to Rome at speed, a chance to organize themselves and begin harassing and harrying the Samnites. Sulla finally arrived with his armies around noon of the same day, and ordered camp near the Colline gate. Though his generals advised him to allow his men to recuperate from their long, overnight march, Sulla allowed his legions only a meal and a short rest. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, as the sun was beginning to drop in the sky, Sulla deployed his battle lines. During the ensuing battle, which took place throughout the entire night, Sulla's left flank collapsed. This forced his men to fight with their backs to Rome's walls. With Marians manning those walls, Sulla's men were forced to fight both in front and behind themselves all night long. Though Sulla rode to his left flank and pleaded, encouraged, and even threatened his men into continuing the fight, the left side of his army was shattered, with many casualties. Then word came from another of Sulla's lieutenants. Marcus Licinius Crassus, whom Sulla had put in command of his right flank, had completely routed the Marians' left flank. Crassus wanted to know if they could have supplies so the men could break for some food. Sulla used Crassus's victory to boost the morale of his left-flanking men until Crassus's men could ride to their aid, and the fighting continued throughout the night. By morning, Sulla's army had seized the camps of the Samnite leader, as well as Marian commander, Carinus, causing many among the Marian command to flee. By daybreak, the entire Marian army broke ranks and ran. Though more than 50,000 men fell at the Battle of Colline Gate, Sulla, alone, stood as master of Rome.